Ciao, creative friends. My name is Joeebalestrieri. Welcome to my work table. I think this probably looks a little bit strange to some of you from my normal videos, and it is. It's a little bit of a departure from what we normally make, but I asked the question if anyone was interested in seeing jewelry and pieces with silk ribbon embroidery, and the response was overwhelmingly yes. So if you know how to do this, you may want to fast forward through the beginning of the video because I am going to do this for complete beginners, someone who has never attempted this before. So I'm going to discuss the supplies and some alternatives and less expensive things and different ways to finish your embroidery. And I also will just preface this by saying, if this looks like over the top to you and too frilly and too old-fashioned, remember that with techniques, once you learn a few stitches and a few ways of doing things, you don't have to make it so frilly. You can do simple leaves or ferns. You can do more contemporary, more scaled back pieces. You don't have to do lace underneath things. So remember that sometimes learning a technique, you can run with it and make it your own. So, maybe hang in there with me if this is brand new to you. So these pieces that I have here are my work from over 30 years ago, and I have kind of set my embroidery aside, but for 2024, there's some really big trends that are happening in jewelry which have come back, and they're quite classic. One of them is brooches. Another one is flowers. Like, flowers are making a comeback. And also, although all stylists and fashion commentators say that bows are really on trend right now, and people either love them or hate them, bows can be done beautifully with silk ribbon. And the other trend is bold jewelry, like a big statement jewelry. So large brooch with some embroidery, can just be really trendy right now, but they also have a timeless elegance. And for me, this is a return to loveliness. So let's dive in. This is a brooch that I made, like I said, over 30 years ago. And back then I was not as great at my finishing off as I am now, but the embroidery is the same. And I just want to point this out to you. This looks really busy and maybe complicated, but in reality there's only 4 stitches here that have been repeated in different colors, and most of the embroidery stitches, most of them, you can do them with anything. You can do them with a regular like cross stitch thread that you get at the craft store. You can do them with silk ribbon. You can do them with silk thread, or even like a nylon or satiny thread. So there's not that much here in the way of technique, really simple basic stitches. So I'm going to show you a couple of things that we can do. Let me set these aside. I'll leave these little samples. I'll give you a little close-up view of this one too. This is a sachet. It has a little lavender pouch inside, and I actually taught myself how to do the tatted lace as well. Tatting was a handicraft in the Victorian era, before the industrial age, when machines could make lace. And the Victorians used to have these really beautiful shuttles that they would use to make these knots. But I taught myself how to do it with a tatting needle. And so I used to make my own lace patterns and things like that. So that's what you see here. But I'm going to show you that sometimes with vintage shopping, you can find like whole spools where someone has sat and handmade the tatted lace, and you can add that into your embroidery. So I'm just going to set those aside. I may have to move them out of the way and talk to you first about what you can stitch onto. So you do not need much. You need really tiny little scraps of fabric, and I do buy silk sometimes because we have a place here that I can get it very reasonably, but you can go to almost any of the craft stores, and if you know anyone that sews, you can definitely just ask for the teeny tiniest little scraps for smaller pieces like the brooches. And a lot of times for larger pieces, you would really want an embroidery hoop, but honestly, I just hold it in my hand because I'm doing such small work. I don't bother with a hoop, but if you feel like that would help you, then you might want to try that. The other thing you can do, you can embroider right onto ribbon. So, as long as you can get your needle through and pull the ribbon through, and you'll see that might help you determine what you can do, but you can actually embroider onto ribbon as well. And the other thing you can do, like you saw in this piece, I don't know if you noticed, this piece is a piece of pink silk, and then I had a vintage bit of fabric from a Victorian wedding gown that I bought in an antique shop in downtown Orlando here. And what I did is laid that on top of the silk and just embroidered on top of both pieces. So you can take a really inexpensive piece of lace and get a totally different look by laying it on top of whatever you're going to embroider. And then you just pull your needle through both pieces at the same time. So you can see you can kind of alter the way your base looks with some of these things. And one final thing I will share with you, linen works really great to embroider on. So let me show you something. This is a pair of wide-legged linen pants that I have worn and washed, and they got a big hole in them, and I have thrown them into my fabric box because you can cut up old garments too, like especially this is 100% linen. I'll show you. So it has a nice, let me find the little tag here. So see, it's 100% linen. And so, I mean, it's perfectly good fabric where there is no hole, and you can see how nice linen is to be able to pull your needle and silk ribbons through it. So even if you have old garments that are made like an old silk blouse or tank top or linen pants or something that are worn out that you're not wearing anymore, those can be great because, as you saw, you just need a really tiny amount of fabric for brooches and pendants. So those are some of those options. Now I'm going to bring in a rather delicious looking dish of things and just talk to you. As I said, if you are familiar with this, you may want to just fast forward. But I wanted to do this for people that are just getting started, so you could have an idea, if you want to try this, what you can do as far as supplies. So here in Orlando, we have a place called the Sewing Studio. It's been there for like 60 years, and they sell all kinds of supplies for people making wedding and formal wear, all kinds of seamstress type things. They have a whole section for embroidery and silk ribbon embroidery, and you can go and buy like a fat quarter of silk for $3.88. Now, I don't know, I haven't purchased these, I've had these in my supplies for a decade or more, but that is one option if you actually want a piece of silk to embroider on. So I have those as well. And then I just pulled out like an array of things. And again, my supplies are really old because I've been doing this for a long time. But one of the things that many of you may have is this DMC floss that you buy at any craft store. If you've ever done cross stitch or anything like that, you can do so many of your stitches. Pretty much you can do any of your stitches that you do with silk ribbon, you can also do with this. And I always love to have a little metallic thread. So it comes in a couple of ways. The little metallic threads, let me see if I can show you where I have used, well, I used it on my pin cushion. So I'll show you, I don't know if you can see the little metallic thread in my pin cushion. Oh no, that's a bead. I guess I don't have a piece here where I have used the metallic thread, but it's really pretty. It's a really pretty little bit of shine, in your stitches. So those are options for that. And then you can actually buy thread that is silk. You can buy thread that is polyester, but has that silky feel. So let's see. I think that might be what this is. What do I have here? Oh, a little, I don't throw anything out. So this is a little piece of metallic gold, and it's perfect for something. So let me see if I can see what these are. Yeah, this is a rayon thread, but it's quite silky, so it pulls through the fabric really nicely, and it just gives you a different look in your stitches. So these are just some of the things that I have had in my supplies for years. And you can also use organza ribbon to make your roses and different flowers out of. This is a vintage satin ribbon, and it is so soft. I bought it at an antique shop in a box of ephemera, and so even things like that can work. This is I save every little scrap because you'll see the stitches are quite small, and sometimes the tiniest little piece adds something to your design. But this is one of the wider millimeters. I think this is 7 millimeter wide. So your silk ribbon itself actually comes in different widths, so that will give you different looks on your flower. This is another pure silk, and this one is it's an odd measurement, 2.74 millimeter wide. Let's see, this is another 7 millimeter, and like I said, my supplies are very old. And then I would always keep some actual silk thread in my supplies too, and I cannot even remember where I got this. But what I did do in advance of making this video is I went on Amazon and found a silk ribbon seller, and I just, even though I don't need supplies, I just ordered one of these little color selections where you got 5 spools, and this is the 4 millimeter, which if you're starting from 0, that's a really great size. It's like right in the middle. It's a medium size width. And so when I started, I literally bought one 4 millimeter spool of thread in pink, and I got one 4 millimeter spool of the, not thread, of the silk ribbon in a really pretty green, so that I could practice flowers and leaves. So if you're wanting to try this, that would be an inexpensive way to try your hand at it. So I will link this below because they had many colors, and it looks pretty good to me. In fact, I didn't open it yet, but I will open it. Let me open it right on camera, and we'll have a look at it together. I just wanted to be able to give you guys some information on some available things for supplies if you want to do this. So this looks really beautiful. This looks so pretty. Oh wow, yeah, this is a really good, it's not super wide and it's not really skinny. So for brand new people who, you know, are just going to begin trying some stitches, this is really a great width, and you can do an awful lot with it. So as I said, I will link these below. This is an Amazon product because, you know, I don't know how many of you are going to have like I'm really fortunate to have the sewing studio very close to me. So when I was doing this a lot, I would go get supplies. And the other thing you'll need to embellish, which most of us that make jewelry have tons of little seed beads in our stash, and these are beautiful for just adding into the middle of flowers. So you could see, like on this piece here, I used a little sequin and I just stitched it down and put a seed bead right in the middle. A little glass pearl for the center of a flower can just be beautiful. And like this is a stitch called turkey tracks, and I just put a little 15-0 seed bead, or these are actually needlework seed beads, but you can use your 15-0s. I just stitched in at the very end a little tiny seed bead that's silver lined, just to add a sparkle to my stitches. So those are some of the things that you can do. And then let's see what else is in here. Oh, if any of you are familiar with the old yo-yo quilts, you know, this is what a yo-yo looks like. You would start with a circle and just fold it under and stitch around and pull it tight and gather it. So I would sometimes do these really tiny to sew into my silk ribbon embroidery or to use as a flower center. What else is in here? And let's see. These are really old frames that I have had that I lacquered so they wouldn't tarnish. And I am not going to be working with these today because I've found some more updated things for finishing off our project together that will be readily available. I don't even remember where I got these, and I don't even think I was living in Orlando when I bought those. So these are when I'm working with just open frames like this, and you may where you live, you may have a source where you've seen things like this. So this is what you need for those. You will need 2 pieces of fabric. So I think I had already started this one. Also, I forgot to mention moire fabric works really well. It's inexpensive, and this is a fabric. I don't know if you can see, if you don't know what moire is, it has almost like a wood grain in the weave of the fabric, and it's not silk. It's polyester, I think, or rayon. I'm not really sure, but this moire gives you a nice texture because you have, I don't know if the camera's showing you, but you have that nice kind of weave showing up in the fabric, and then you stitch on top of that. But all you need is a little bit wider piece of fabric than your final piece. You need a little bit of an edge here in order to wrap it around. And for an open frame like that, you need 2 pieces of cardboard, poster board, anything like that. So you'll do your stitches, layer it on top, then after your stitches are done, you glue this down, and then you do the same thing on a blank side and then sandwich those together so that you have a finished back, and then the little frame goes on top of your stitches. But I'm going to simplify this even more than that because, not that this is hard, but I plan to simplify this really so that I'm hoping that those of you who are brand new to this will be able to accomplish something that you're really proud of and not frustrated with. So that is my plan. Make sure there's nothing else on my little beautiful platter. Oh, on this vein, let me just share my little dish here with you. So as I mentioned, you can do your stitches right on top of ribbon. So I created this little component stitching right onto this vintage satin ribbon, and you can go into your jewelry supplies and use like check glass flowers and rounds and bead caps, and go ahead and finish off your silk ribbon, and I'll show you what my plan is for that little sample that I did. And so we're going to start off with a rose that you do not pull through the fabric and do not stitch on the fabric, a rose that you actually make holding in your hand with needle and thread and ribbon. And so I have a few of them here. And so you can actually make these little roses out of organza ribbon, silk ribbon, satin ribbon, and here's some really, really tiny ones. You see, let me put this down and put my hand behind it. Really, really tiny. And I just made this in my hand, and then let me pull this back in, and then you can sew it right onto your project. So I'll show you how to do that. That's going to be one of the flowers that we make, and you can sit, as I have done, and make some of them in advance. Like these, I didn't sew them onto a project. They're just on a backing. And so those are just some of the things you can do. But as I said, don't panic. I'm planning to simplify this so that it is completely doable. Set this out of the way. And so the next thing that I will share with you is like what I use for my backing. These are ready to go, but these are the backs of a cracker box. I literally was throwing a cracker box away, and I went in the pantry and just took some of that because this is like not project board that has like a foam core, but like the poster board that we would buy for our kids' projects. That is all you need. And so this is how I plan to simplify this a little bit. Let me show you what I found. I found these little brooch backs on BB Craft, I believe, and there was a couple of available shapes, and the pin back is already on the back of those. And then also, this is something I had in my jewelry supplies from Amazon, and it is just these little filigree connectors or components that have all these little openings for making pendants and things in jewelry design, and we can actually do that. And then I also wanted to mention that if you go hunting in the craft stores, you can find things too. Now these pieces here, I will open one. These pieces here are from Amazon, and they come with a glass, like, is it glass? I think it is glass. But so you could put a piece of fabric or, you know, a picture or whatever you wanted, and then you would like glue this down. But silk ribbon embroidery is dimensional, and we're going to put beads, maybe buttons, you know, things. So I don't know if you can see, but there's no space because this is flat. So in this case, I would discard, you know, take this away and just put my embroidered piece right on this pendant. So those are available on Amazon, and you know, it would be modified because, as I said, silk ribbon embroidery is dimensional, so you can't really glue something flat on it. But going back to what I said about if this is much too frilly and, you know, that is not your style, totally okay. You can go for frames for your pieces that are very contemporary with very straight, clean lines, more updated. Like you can do a very plain little frame and set your silk ribbon piece in there and do a more simplified, you know, embroidery part. So those are just some things that I found from Amazon. And then I believe that my other pieces that I found in advance of this video, sorry for the noise, the other things that I found at Michael's Crafts in advance of this video was this little locket. And I've had this for a little while too, but if you did want to encase your stitches, I found this. I believe this is a magnet. Yes, it is. And so it has a little space in here, so I could set my project in there and then close it, and there's a little bit of space in between these two pieces of glass. So that would be, when I saw that, I thought, oh, how perfect to put one of my embroidery pieces inside. And then I also found this one, and I don't know if this is, yeah, this is Michael's. I also found this little locket that has a tiny bit of, oh no, this one doesn't have a lot of space. But if you did like really flat stitches, you could place it inside and put a little lock on it. So those are just some ideas if you start to gather supplies to do this. And then what I have here, let me set these aside. We're actually going to do a brooch, but I just wanted to show you, if you end up just having a flat piece of filigree, you can take a cracker box like I did here, and I actually used a hole punch and a card, you know, I'm not a card, the end of a cracker box, and I just turned my punch upside down and put my little cardboard in there and pop it right out, and I have a perfect circle. But on these, I didn't have a square punch, so I just measured and did a perfect square. And so once you've done that, because on this type where you would see the back, you would need two pieces of your cardboard so that you can make a nice clean backing. So in other words, it will show nice and clean through the back, and then your embroidery would go on this, and they would be sandwiched together like that. So what I was thinking on this one is to do just one little flower, maybe add some seed beads, cover it with the fabric and glue it there, and then attach this with a jump ring to the bottom. But any kind of a little filigree shape that you love, you could do the same thing. And again, you can play around with it. I was playing with doing the square this way or doing a square that way. You can also, like, your filigree is really fun to work with. You could do your chains going up this way, and you know, I will try to find these on my Amazon order and link them below, because it was a whole container of different filigree shapes to work with, and that's really fun. And from here, you can actually take one of these little pin backs and just glue it right onto the back if you want a brooch. Or this could be a double pendant and brooch where you have the option to wear it either way. So let me see, one other thing. I love vintage things. So like I said, I have found teeny tiny little scraps of tatting in boxes of ephemera, and those are really sweet to stitch underneath. And I love vintage things. So this is actually vintage, actually maybe antique sequins from a wedding dress, a Victorian wedding dress. And I just kept it together on its little netting. And when I need a little sequin for one of my designs, I just pull it off, and I've been keeping them in here. And also little vintage baby buttons and mother of pearl buttons. These were on, let me see if I can show you how old these are. These were on this little card. They're little vintage baby buttons. Back in the day, they were 10 cents, and there was a whole card of them. And these sweet, tiny little buttons are just beautiful. You can use them as the center of your ribbon flowers, or you can use them just, as a little extra texture in your design. But see, I've done that here, and then I just put a few little seed beads through the holes of the button. This is a little check glass vintage drop that I just added into my embroidery with some seed beads. And you can see what I did with those vintage sequins here. They had such a candlelight glow. They just had a look. You can still buy sequins, but I just love these old ones. So that's that. And this is a tiny little mother of pearl bead that went in the center of this flower, some little seed beads in the center of this flower. So that is just some of the things that you can do when you start embroidering. Start with your basic stitches and go from there. So this is my little introduction. I am going to pause here, clean up my mat, and come back, and we are going to get right on to a really simple project. Okay, I cleaned up a little bit from the things that I wanted to show you, and we do need to talk about needles. I'll pop a picture up to talk to you about the different needles. And guys, don't overthink this. There's a chenille needle, which has a really large eye. There's a tapestry needle, and there's an embroidery needle. And of course, they all come in sizes. Embroidery, the most common size is size 7 to 9 if you go to buy needles, but you can also get like a pack with all the different sizes that go like from 3 to 9 with different size eyes. I honestly don't even know what my sizes are. These are the 2 that I have ready to go because years ago I made this little needle case with the tiny little yo-yos inside and a little silk ribbon bow that was just tacked down, and I just lined up some needles in pins on the inside of a piece of felt and just made that little like needle book for myself. And the other thing that I do is I have my little pin cushion here, and I will go ahead and thread like a couple of the needles with the silk ribbon that I'm using, some of my metallic thread, some of the like nylon cord or silk, nylon thread or silk thread that I'm using. So I have a few needles that are like threaded and ready to go, and that saves me a little bit of time when I'm switching from roses to different roses. So I just have that sitting off to the side. And then I also keep a small like regular sewing needle, and I keep it threaded with just, as my Italian grandmother used to say, with cotton. She used to call this thread cotton. And so I just do that, and this comes in handy for so many things when you're doing this embroidery, from attaching tiny little buttons to even the spider web rows that we're going to do. So I have that here, and I wanted to show you how to thread the needle and tie the knot with the silk. So I think I'm going to do a rose. We will do a rose for this one that I mentioned earlier that you actually make in your hand. I showed you some little samples of those, but we're going to do a little rose with the silk thread. And I happen to have this one that is like a tie-dye thread, if you can see, like, so for roses that are going to have, or any flower really, but I am starting with a rose. It will look like a rose. I mean, you know, it's a fluffy flower. So that was going to be my other advice if you're brand new, is maybe go for a fantasy flower. You know, something that's not an actual rose or a lily or a wisteria or an orchid or something, you know, just something that's just flowery and fluffy and beautiful and maybe not specific. It might make it a little bit easier, and you know, you won't you won't you know, have something you're proud of at the end, because it does take a little bit of practice with your stitching and to kind of see how the ribbon lays and pulls through the fabric. So, you know, to start off with, just go for a fantasy flower and you'll love it. So I'm going to do my first little flower with this, and I'm just going to estimate and take some off of here. You don't want it too long because you will be pulling this through the fabric, but you know, you don't waste it, because if you have ribbon left over from your flower, I just put the needle threaded with that back onto my pin cushion. Like, here's what was left over of my lavender from this little project, and then that's threaded and ready for another flower. So that's just kind of my method. And so this was one that I had that was like a tie-dye. You can get variegated silk ribbon, you can get different things, and as I mentioned, I haven't purchased supplies in a very long time, so I can't give a lot of advice about what's out there right now for silk ribbon embroidery supplies. The other thing, as I mentioned earlier, to get started, choose one green that you really love. Now I have a few different greens here, and this 4mm is a good medium size that you can do so much with. So that would be my recommendation if you're just going to give this a try, is one green and one color, and you know, practice with that. So I have these three. I have to choose which one. They're really similar, but one of the reasons that I had collected different shades is kind of the same thing that we do with our beads, is to create dimension. And I can't talk. I think I'm a little bit excited to be doing this again, because this is something that I sort of put away, and I think I feel really excited to be doing this again and to be sharing it, because I've honestly never taught anyone how to do it. I taught myself, actually. So anyway, I have my greens there, and I'm going to start with this. And you know, in order to select your needle, you really just don't want to damage your ribbon getting it through the eye of the needle. So that's really, you know, that's really all there is to say about that. And I will say too that these scissors are very old. I've had these since I was a teenager when I got my first sewing machine, and they are really old, but I have never ever cut anything besides fabric with them, or silk, or you know, like these silk ribbons. So they are extremely razor sharp, even after all these years, because I would never cut a piece of paper or anything with those. So good scissors, you know, can be really helpful not to tear up the ends of your ribbon. And so a little angled cut and through the eye of the needle, and again, you can see that the eye of my needle is not damaging my ribbon. So that's really all there is to that. And then give yourself a little bit of length. You can't leave this hanging out like this without being secured, because it will come off the needle when you are pulling it through the fabric. So the only thing you have to do is give yourself enough space to put the needle back through toward the end somewhere, not too close, because you don't want it to fray. And that's all you are going to do. And then just slide it down and just pull it over the eye of that needle, and give it a little tug. Give that a little tug. And so you have now secured your silk ribbon onto the eye of the needle. So now you can begin your embroidery. And I'm going to start with this one that will require a backing, so that I can show you what to do if you have a little filigree piece like this and you don't have, you know, this kind of a thing. And you may want to try this without ordering anything to see if you like it. And I have both of these little scraps together, and I have taken a pencil and just roughly drawn a little circle around the cardboard that I'm going to be covering. And I'm just going to go a little bit on the outside of that, just to get, I mean, you could just leave this little extra, but I like to get get myself organized and start with a nice clean little space, because you could always trim more later, and we will need a little bit of excess. So the reason for this is that I know that I need to center my embroidery in the very center of this, and the reason for the excess is that in order to cover my little piece of cardboard, I'm going to do it this way and put some little cuts so that I can make a perfect little edge covering this when my embroidery is done. So that's the reason to that, and we can go ahead and do the second project that we're going to do. I used a little different fabric, just a tiny, you can see it doesn't even fill up my hand. It's a tiny little scrap of fabric, and I'm not even going to make a pencil mark on this one. I'm just going to like trim away. So it's roughly the same shape as the center of my brooch, but I have a little extra for wrapping and for holding on to while I'm doing the piece. So, and there's a lot more. I don't want to overwhelm you with information. There's a lot more to be said. A really cool iron to make sure you don't have any creases in ribbon or in fabric if you want to do that, but I try so hard not to overcomplicate things for myself and for you guys, so that this is totally doable and not too many steps. So I'm just going to set this aside and go to that needle that I have threaded with the white cotton thread, and you can do this with a pencil if you want to. So sometimes I just eyeball it, but I want to make a rose right in the very center of this brooch, and then I'm going to embellish with some leaves and some things around the rose. We're going to call it a rose, but it can be like a fantasy flower. And I just need to draw myself 5 pencil lines, kind of like a wagon wheel, around the same length. And you know, these are going to be covered up. So there's 3, there's 4. When I started out doing this, I used to actually measure the length of my lines so that they would all be the same. But I found that, you know, it just really isn't necessary. And a lot of times now I do these, it's a spider rose. I do these without even making the lines, but we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 lines approximately the same length. And now I am going to take my white thread here and come from the back of my little piece of silk right in the middle of those 5 lines, or thereabouts in the middle. This will all be covered up, so it doesn't have to be perfect. And then I'm just going to do a straight stitch, just go back down over one of those lines. And I know that it's very pale. I know that it is white thread on the silk. And again, I love these colors, but you can do black silk, you can do burgundy, like you can work in rich, deep jewel tone colors too, if that's what makes you happy. This is what I have because this is the look that I love for these projects, but you can definitely do your own thing. And you know, that would also make this more contemporary, I think, as well, to do darker colors. Okay, let's continue. Just going to come up to the next, where my next little line is, and make a straight stitch. Just poking the needle back down through right at the end of my little mark that I made. And I'm going to do that all the way around. Just go back over to my next little line, come up from the back, and poke it back down through. That is one thing I forgot to tell you. When you are working with silk and silk ribbon, you don't need to pull really tight. Your tension is kind of important, and you'll get it, and you can tell that I'm a little bit out of practice because I've pulled twice pretty tight and puckered my fabric, but this is very fine fabric and the ribbon we're working with too, so gentle pressure, because a lot of times especially when we pull the silk ribbon through, if you pull too hard you can pull it right through the fabric, so don't do what I just did. It was actually a good opportunity to explain about that. And then we're just going to come over to the back side and just find like a little spot in the middle. Again, this is all going to be covered up, and I'm just going to make a little loop and just tie it off. Now I have seen people take a lighter to the back of their silk ribbon projects, like to instead of tying knots like on the silk ribbon. I've never done that, and I probably will never do it. I don't know, there's just something about that feels so wrong to me, to set fire to silk, but it is a way of, you know, taking care of your knots on the back. But I just do it this way, just little looped knots. And now we can trim this. We don't need this. I actually have a thread scissor that's really great as well, and I should be using that. I keep this for my silk fabric. I have a little tiny thread scissor, and it's from England, and I've also had this since I was a little girl. And another thing that I don't cut anything, never cut paper, never cut anything with it but threads and silk ribbons, and they stay really, really sharp. So that's just a little embroidery advice if you're going to start doing this, and if you begin to collect supplies, you know, just something to keep in mind with, you know, like I keep a pair of junk cutters for thicker wire at my work table so that I don't dull my really fine wires. So, you know, just a little embroidery advice. Okay, so now we're going to switch to our very first color, and I'm going to do the same thing. Just find a little spot about in the middle on the back and just come right up to the middle of that little spider or little 5-petal thing that I made. I think I picked up I went through my knot, and I'm just going to pull this down. Oh, I forgot to tie a knot on this end. And you actually don't even have to tie a knot. You actually can just let it rest on the back and then pull your needle back through it, and that will secure it. And this is where sometimes I've seen people do silk ribbon embroidery, and they will just pull this through to the back like that and let it hang out and do their stitching, and then take a lighter to the back of their embroidery. I don't do it that way, but I have seen it done. Okay, so now I'm right here, and now I just want to go over this what am I going to call this leg or this stitch that I made. I'm going to go over it, and I'm going to put my needle under the next one, and just go slowly with your ribbon. And like sometimes it will make a knot or a loop, and you may want that, but just pull it slowly into place. And so there is my start. Now I'm going to skip the next one, so I'm letting the ribbon lay over that next little leg, and I'm going to go under this little leg or stitch and just pull that ribbon into place. If you want to let it do a twist, what we're making in the very center here is the center of our flower. So it can be a little knot, it can be a little fluffy. See how it got twisted a little bit that time under the stitch? That's perfect. I love that. And then I went under that one, so I'm going to let my ribbon go over the next stitch and go under this one. And you'll see we start to build it out. Just gently pull it into place toward the center, and you can already see you can use your needle if you want to snuggle things up as we go around. So we continue around, you'll see why we had the odd number, why we had the 5, because we're going to continue that over, under, all the way around and build this flower. So we went under this stitch. Now we're going to let the ribbon go over this one. And even if you want to, you can even give it a little twist yourself before you, you know, put your needle in. So now we go under this leg and just pull that ribbon. And you can already see it's taking shape. It's so beautiful. And then over that one and under this one. And we're just going to continue like that until we reach capacity on the length of our stitches that we made. So maybe you're already seeing that if we made a longer stitch, you would have a much bigger flower. So, you know, that's, but this is a very small piece, so I didn't do that. I wanted it to be kind of small because I want to have space to put some leaves and some other embellishments. And can you also see that I am just very gently letting my ribbon just kind of land where it will, and I'm not pulling it super tight. And just see how my ribbon made a little turn that time, and that is beautiful. It's looking like a flower petal. And you can, as you stack your next turn, your next circle, you can let it overlap a little bit, just like how when a flower is blooming, just how, you know, the petals are random and it's full and fluffy as it opens. So I love this kind of a rose. I think this is so beautiful, and I tend to do this and just pull, even though my ribbon is twisted, and I let it twist. I just let it, so I got a really beautiful little twist in that one. And if I'm ever not happy, like this part is pretty flat here, as I go around, if it looks too flat and not fluffy enough, you can take your needle and kind of make a little adjustment. And that's again where that white little threaded needle that I keep on the side comes in handy, because sometimes I'll add in a little bead or something, but you can make little adjustments with your needle. And also you can put things on the inside. Like a lot of times when I do these, I'll go back with a really small needle and just fill the center with some little seed beads, or sometimes a tiny little baby button, or, you know, you can just really have fun and play. And as I said, especially if you go for a fantasy flower, you know, you just are just making up a flower, you know, so however it turns out, it's just a beautiful flower. So I'm going to back this out and give it a little bit more of a twist, just because I didn't like the way it landed there. That's better. And then I'm on the over, and then I'm going to go under this one. Oh, that one was really pretty. I like the way that one turned out. Oh my goodness, you guys. A redbird just landed on my windowsill. A mommy redbird. I mean, she's like 3 inches away from my work table on the windowsill. If I could switch my camera quickly, I would show you. But it would be a little bit difficult to take the tripod apart. But she's so beautiful. She wants food in the bird feeder. I have to go out and feed them. So I'm going to go over this one. I'm sorry, but I have so much nature on my patio, and you know, I just love it. Okay, so I'm going to go over this one, and I'm going to go under this one. I want to make this as full as I can get it. It's looking so beautiful. I love it. Love the way it's turning out. Okay, and let's see. I think I may finish up right here because well, let's see. I'm going to go over. I'm going to give this a little twist. Maybe I can get one more round. And then I'm going to go under this one right here. Get my needle under. It's getting full. Oh, that's beautiful. That looks great. And then I think I am ready to tie this off. and this is the perfect spot right here. And so I'm just going to poke my needle down and go right through, pull it right through to the back. Now I'm going to put my thumb over this just to get this needle through the fabric and make sure that I don't pull too tightly on any of my stitches. I want them to stay where they are. And then you can like manipulate a little bit, and this is where I said I love to go back at the end and, you know, with that really thin needle with the white thread on it, and maybe add in things. Although this one doesn't need it. That just turned out absolutely beautiful. The little tie-dye or ombre silk thread gives a lot of dimension. So I am really happy with that. So here I'm just on the back side. I'm just going to run this underneath, and I'm going to add in some other things, so that will get tacked down at the end, and I can cut that away. And I keep a few needles because there is enough silk ribbon on this needle to do other flowers. So I'm just going to put that in my little pin cushion over here and, you know, switch to my green. So from here you can decide. Now I usually would switch at this point to like a silk thread and do like another little stitch, but since I'm doing this for silk ribbon itself and also for complete beginners, I'm going to show you a super simple, well, I'll show you 2 stitches on this one that are super simple that you can use for leaves or for flower petals. Depending on what color thread or silk ribbon you use, you can get different looks with it. So let me choose one of my greens at this point, and I think I have this super bright green. I think that I like this little bit darker, kind of a neutral green. And like I said, like my supplies have been wrapped around these cards for so long and haven't been used. So if I was doing like a bow or doing something where it really mattered that I get these creases out, I have a little steamer, or putting your ribbon between 2 pieces of like a handkerchief and a cool iron and just like smoothing those out. But it's not necessary. It's really not. I'm just going to cut a little length and keep going. I'm going to take another needle and do that same thing again. Prepare my ribbon, just get it through the eye of the needle, and take my needle and put it back through the ribbon, a little bit near the end like that, and just pull it down and just give it a pull. Gently. It's silk. There you go. You know, you have to be gentle with it, but as I do this, I'm always surprised at also how tough it is too, because it's a natural, you know, it's a totally natural fabric. Okay, and then I'm going to do another little, like, just, I don't like to have a lot of knots on the back of a piece, especially a piece this small. So I'm going to just let it lay there. And because at the end I plan to add in some beads and sequins with thread, I'll be running a little needle and thread through all of this, and that will secure it. So now I'm just going to choose a little spot on my rose, and I'm going to, with the silk thread, I'm going to do, with the silk ribbon, I'm going to do the lazy daisy stitch. And you can do this with silk ribbon, you can do this with embroidery floss, you can do this with a silk floss. Different materials that you do this exact same stitch with will give you a different look. And if you wanted to do your pencil mark with this, you can. I am going to eyeball it. I really want to make this simple. So I'm going to come up right here behind my rose so that the beginning of my leaf, can you see, is started behind my rose, and I'm just going to gently pull it through my silk, not too tight. So that's what it looks like on the back. And then I'm going to decide where I want my little leaf to be, and let's see. So I'm kind of seeing where it's kind of making a loop, if that makes sense. And I'm going to come back to where I was before and go down into the fabric. And then I'm going to bring my needle back up to the spot where I want my loop to end. I think it's easier if I just show you because I feel like I'm not explaining it very well. But I'm just going to loop that around. Just hold it with my thumb and just pull the needle through. Before I pull it through, let me show you what I did, really with a close. So I came up from the bottom, and then I went down, my needle went down, and then I came back up, and before I pull it through, I've looped this, made like a little loop around the needle, and just hold it with my thumb, and then just gently pull it through. And again, here's where I was telling you that with silk ribbon embroidery, you don't see how loose it is. You don't want to pull things super tight. And so once I get it about like I want, you can use your needle. Like if you want a little twist in your embroidery, you know, a little twist in your thread, anything that you want secured. And like I said, I always go back with another needle and like some little beads. And then I'm just going to secure it by going right down over my needle, just going over where that loop ends, and just pull it through. And again, not super tight. It's like a little stitch to just tack it down. And so we have our first little leaf. And then let's see, I'm going to decide, I think I'm going to do another one right here. So I can just go to the back, and I want to come up again behind my rose. I want this leaf to be right next to the other one. So I'm going to bring my needle from the back right about there and just pull it through gently. Before you go any further, you can smooth things out. And I'm going to do the same thing. Just decide where that little leaf is going to go. Go down again, right next to where I came up. Just go down and just hold my silk out of the way and come back up like that. And before I pull, I'm just going to bring with a little twist this time. I got a little twist in there this time. Just bring that silk around, put my thumb over it, and just pull it through. Not too tight. Watch your strength there. And so for me, if I need to cover up anything, I always can go back and add in a little sequin or something, but I don't need to cover up anything. I'm really happy with the way this turned out, but I probably still will just add in, because the layering of seed beads and buttons and sequins and your other different threads and fibers is what makes silk ribbon embroidery so dimensional and so fascinating. Okay, and then the same thing, I'm just going to place my needle just on the other side of where that thread is coming out and just gently pull it down. It's like a teeny tiny little stitch that just tacks it down. And so we have a little rose that is done. And I do want to add another leaf on the other side, and I do tend to see things in odd numbers pleasingly. So I think I'm going to do, maybe come right here with another leaf and just do like a single leaf. So I'm going to come up from the back and just kind of sneak my needle up behind the rose, so it kind of looks like, you know, the leaf is on the little stem with the rose. And then same thing, I'm just going to smooth out my ribbon and go down right beside where I just came out and then come up right about where I want the end of my leaf to be. Little twist in my ribbon and just hold it down and just push it through. Gently pull it through, just kind of holding everything with my thumb. That one turned out really beautiful. And just put it right there. Now I'm getting a little bit close this time to the edge. I'm going to have to be really careful that I don't snip my silk ribbon. I got a little bit too close to my original outline, but you know, that's one thing. You're the one doing it, so you know, it's your handiwork. And that is that. So beautiful. And let's see, I'm going to show you one more stitch, the other one that I was thinking, and we'll put it right here. This is called the ribbon stitch, and let's see, I've also heard it called, I think they also call it the straight stitch, but I have always called it the ribbon stitch. And I'm going to keep using the same length of ribbon, and I'm going to do that same thing because it's another little leafy thing. I'm going to come up through my fabric. Whoops, I grabbed a hold of my other ribbon. I'm going to come up behind my rose, so where I'm coming up doesn't show when it's laid flat, and just pull it through. And you can keep turning it over because I have, you know, my backing is not full of knots. It's pretty smooth for all of the things that I've done. And so on the ribbon stitch, and this is a good stitch to do when you're getting near the end of your length because it doesn't take much ribbon. You just lay your ribbon wherever you want the leaf to be, and you know, kind of push it a little bit, not totally straight, and then you're going to take your needle and go back down through the ribbon and the fabric and your silk. So before I pull it through, I'll show you. It looks kind of like that. And this is another thing where you don't want to pull it really tight. So I'm just going to gently pull it through, and it makes another little tiny leaf. It's super easy. But you could do this next step with metallic thread, or you know, anything that you want. Like, you're the designer, you're creating. So here I'm just going to come up from the back. I'm going to just place at random some little sequin embellishments, and these are the vintage ones, but you can still buy sequins. So I'm just going to eyeball it and just, you know, kind of get happy with the way that it looks. Just add some sparkle and some dimension. And then I think we'll try one of these green seed beads. And I would like to get something purple on this as well. Look how pretty that is. It adds so much. And then, you know, just like we do with beading, you're going to go back through the hole, and that will back through the same center hole of the sequin, and that will secure your little center bead. And so that's why I keep the white thread, because it just sort of disappears into the embroidery, and I get that look. And then as I'm doing my additional embellishments, I'll be going in and out of what I've already laid across the back of my piece, so that will secure those ribbons. But honestly, this is going to get glued down, so everything will be really secure anyway. I didn't do it on this one, but let's see if we can fit it onto this one. But I love the little turkey tracks. I'll show you again. Can you see the little stitching that's here with the tiny little bead at the end? That little stitch is really easy to do. It's called turkey tracks. And I love that, and I love it coming like from behind the embroidery. And so all three of these little flowers are flowers that I did not pull through the fabric. I actually made them in my hand and then sewed them on. And you can see that I embellished underneath a little bit with a sequin and a seed bead. And this stitch is extremely tiny on this project, but this is called the bullion stitch. And it is not a beginner stitch. It's a little bit tricky to do, but it is one that I really love, and I just love it. And actually I didn't do any French knots on this, but maybe we'll do a French knot on here, because that's another very versatile stitch, and you can do it with silk ribbon, you can do it with thread, and you can actually even do the spider rows with embroidery floss. So you don't have to have silk ribbon for that look. You just would have more times that you would go over under around the flower. That's all. And what we're going to do is take our nice sharp scissors and very carefully up to that line that I made, I am just going to go all the way around this circle, very careful not to cut my, any of my threads or any of my stitches. I just keep a regular old glue stick for this next step. It just works really well. And so I am going to, I want the dark side. I want to make sure that if I've used anything from a dark cracker box, that it is going to be sandwiched where no one will ever see it. And let's see, get my embroidery centered. Give myself a little assist here with some glue from the glue stick. Whoops. And then just start folding those little cuts around. And it looks like I could even make some deeper cuts. But I got myself started, and just get a little bit of glue. You could also use like tacky glue. I use that sometimes too. But it's a lot more it's liquid, and I just really like this. It works really well because the silk is so thin, and it just works really well. A little bit right here. I know it's small and it's hard, but what I'm doing is pulling the backing fabric, pulling it over the edge of my little cardboard shape. It is done. And now we just have to do the same thing to this side. Just take, and this time I will put a little bit of glue right in the middle, and I'm going to face, whoops, I wanted to do it this way, because I want the dark side to be on the inside of what I'm doing here. So I'm just going to do the same thing, just go around and make these little cuts right up to my shape, or your fabric or your linen or whatever you have there. Okay, so we have our other side, and then we sandwich these two together, and I will probably use tacky glue is really great for that, but I have E6000 right here. My bottle of tacky glue is not handy, so I'm just going to take a little bit of E6000. And just make a little sandwich. Again, be careful that your hands are clean of the glue before you touch any of your embroidery or ribbon work. And just sandwich those together. Now from here, if you wanted to take some kind of a trim and like whip stitch it around or glue it around the edge, like you can keep going and going and going with this. I wanted this to be a simple, easy, anyone can do with very few supplies project. And so there's the little embellishment, and now it can get glued right into the center of my medallion, my filigree medallion. So I'm just going to place some E6000 in a few places. This tube is about finished. Just spread it around to make sure that it's where I want it to be. Okay. And now I'm just going to decide if I want this square. I think I do want it at an angle, and I think I want my rose to be right about like that. And the E6000 is probably going to come through the back of this medallion for a little bit, but that is okay. Yeah, just a little bit. That is okay. I'm going to give it a little bit of pressure to make sure that it's adhered. Just wipe it off. Okay, and now I just need to get a little jump ring and add the other little embellishment. But from here you could add a tassel, you can do a beaded chain. From here you have anything. You can then glue your pin back on the back, or you can make this into a bookmarker, which is what I think I might do with it. I don't know. Okay, but let me grab a jump ring. Embroidered piece is done. And so that's what you can do with basic supplies. Very simple, very easy. And we are going to move on to a quick little project with this one. So if you have this style of finding, you don't need to do the two pieces. We just need the one piece. We do our embroidery, cover it, and then glue it inside this little frame. And as you saw, it does take up a little bit of space on the cardboard cutout. So I made my little pattern for this, and there's a little bit of space because when I wrap my silk around, you know, that's going to be filled in. So all we have to do on this one is decide what our little pattern is going to be, what colors we want to use. And so this time I think we will start with one of the roses that we make in our hands. I will show you how to do that. It's really easy. And so let's do a wider ribbon. This is a 7mm, and I'm just going to take a little bit of a length, cut it at an angle, and we need our actually don't need an embroidery needle for this. We need our needle that I keep the white cotton thread, just a small needle and a small little length of thread. That will help us. And the way you make these in your hand is you start by making a little angle, so like that. So you have this little tail, and then start to make a little roll. Now I'm doing this with silk ribbon. For your first time doing this, you may want to try it with satin ribbon because it's a little bit stiffer and it would maybe be a little bit easier. I've practiced making these an awful lot, so I don't find them difficult, but this might be a little challenging if you've never done it. I don't know how well you can see, but I am literally just rolling to make the center of my rose. I want it to be really full, so I'm just making some rolls. And after I've gotten 5 or 6 in, I'm going to take this ribbon and I'm going to twist it and then do another roll. Can you see what it did? And then I'm going to do another little roll and then another twist backwards. Get a good twist in there, and then continue to roll. And the reason I have the needle and thread handy is that it does become a little bit to hold on to. So I'm going to get one more twist in there. And can you see how beautiful the center of it is? One more twist. And now I'm going to stop there and take my needle and just pierce the base of all those wraps that I did. So it's going to secure all the wrapping that I did, and you can see the center of my rose. So I'm just going to pull that through. It's got a knot on the end. And now I don't have to hold on to this so much anymore because it's secured. Let's pull it tight. This one time you do want to pull it tight. And then I'm going to do another twist. And just, you can see I'm kind of laying it in and making another roll. And try to do two. But whenever you feel you can't hold on to it, pick up that needle and go through again. Just grab the two little twists and rolls that you just did, and it secures it. You can drop the needle and continue twisting and wrapping. And like I said, I'll try to do whatever I can hold on to. I'll try to do a couple before I run my needle through the base again. So I'm going to stop there and run my needle through, and I'll show you. You can be done here. Like if you're happy with this, you can totally be done here. You can twist this down. Maybe I will do one more. When you get toward, where you're ready to finish off your rose, you can do more tacking down like I'm doing right here. But you want to make sure you're not bringing your needle up too far. Like that is not in a good spot. You just want to catch that last little wrap that you did. And just pull it through. And I'm going to do one more stitch because I'm going to make this a really ruffly blooming rose. So I folded that back and I just want to get my needle going in the direction of my tail of ribbon. So that's what I have. I just have this little bit of ribbon left over, and I'm just going to pull my needle through. So this part that I've already done is tacked down and looking beautiful. And now I'm going to go to the bottom part of this ribbon and just do like a running stitch right here. I'm just going to, can you see? I'm just going in and out or up and down. Just a running stitch, just a simple, like this is also called a basting stitch. Just a simple in and out. I'm just going to use up the, whoops, I missed the ribbon. I'm just going to use up the rest of the length of this little piece of silk. One more. Okay, so it looks like that. Let me get a hold of my needle. So it looks like that. It's a little gathered, just a little in and out stitch. And I am just going to pull my needle all the way through. And I'm going to wrap. If you've never sewn before, maybe this won't make sense, but if you've ever sewn anything, you know that that's how you make like little gathers. And that's what I'm doing, to make like a little ruffle around one side of the rose. And again, don't forget, you've got needle and thread here, so you can, use that if you're having trouble holding on to everything, like it's not cooperating. So I'm going to go back through the base of my rose again with my needle and thread. And can you see that I caught also the beginning of my ruffle? And it's a little bit organic, like there's really, I always found at least, and like maybe others do it differently than me, but I always found there's really no right or wrong. Like I just kind of found a spot on the base and I have just pulled those gathers that I made, and I think that is just beautiful. If I'm happy with it, then it was a successful little flower. And I'm just going to grab my tail and run my needle through that base again to the other side. And another little trick is, I mean, if you're making these, like I have a whole box of them because sometimes I'll sit and make them, but if you're making it specifically to go onto a project, you can take this I'm going to tie a little knot right here because I'm super happy with the way this one turned out. So I'm going to just go to the back of my flower and just make a loop and tie a little knot. And now you can use this same thread to go right to your fabric that you're working on and sew it right onto the fabric. So that's what I think I'm going to do. I do want to take and make a little outline with my pencil again, just so that I keep my embroidery on the inside of my outline, if that makes sense. Knowing that I have to, you know, I don't want to stitch to a part of the fabric that's going to be wrapped around the cardboard and get glued into. I want all my stitches to be, you know, on the front of the fabric. So I just have a little pencil outline there, so that tells me where I'm going to trim these tails away before I sew it down. So that tells me how much stitching I can do, and I think that I will do this one right in the center. So I'm just going to start by going through the fabric. And so here, stitching these down, you do want to be careful where you place your needle because you can distort your rows if you put your needle in the wrong place and pull it too tight. So like I'm going to catch that little ruffle. I don't want to come up through the middle top part of one of my wraps, one of my petals. I want to get in there with my needle like that. Can you see where the needle's coming out? So I can secure this without, see, I was able to pull it tight without disturbing my rows. So just be careful when you're tacking these down. That looks great. And then like if there was anything amiss with a ruffle, I can catch that with my needle like I did right there and just tack it down. That one's, it's just like not perfect. So watch what happens. So you just like tack it down and it's looking great. I'm going to come onto this side, just run my needle up right in there. Okay, and so that's the start of our next piece. And I'm just going to tie this off on the back. So I don't know if you can see, I did a little bit of work on this because my battery had to be charged on the camera, but I took my pencil for this little kind of fantasy wisteria, or it can be, I'm doing it with French knots. I do a lot of fantasy flowers, but I took my pencil and just made some little dots, and that's what I filled in with the French knots that I made. And I've done 2 different colors of the silk ribbon, and so for a French knot you just come up from underneath, and I'm going to come up like right at one of my dots and just pull it through. I have a little bit too much ribbon on this, and I'm going to lay this down on my mat because this is such a small project, but if you had a larger project that would fit in an embroidery hoop, it's helpful with the French knots. But I'm just going to take my needle, and in fact, before I do this, let me zoom in a little bit. I'm just going to take my needle and wrap around once, twice, and just pull it kind of tight, and then I'm just going to slide my needle back down through the fabric, pick it up right next to where I came up. So it looks like that. And just going to pull it through. And as I said, I really threaded on. This was the last little bit on an old spool, and I threaded the whole thing on. It's a little bit too much on the needle, but I can make it work. And when you pull it tight, you just get the little knots. And I'm going to make it kind of drip down. That's what my little dots were for. And I've purposefully left some little space in between my French knots because I want to add in some very simple little leaves. They're basically just greenery. I just want it to look kind of fantasy. And you know, my beading mat is a little bit spongy, so that's helpful for this. That same ribbon stitch that we did, I think, I also have a really pretty pink, but I think I'm going to do a little kind of a thistle flower, maybe right here. I don't want to put my needle through that little ruffled edge of the rose that we made, but I do want to come up behind it, so like that. And I'm just going to pull it through. This is very thin silk ribbon, and it's starting to show a little bit of wear from the French knots, but I think I can make it work. So I'm going to do just a little thistle flower. So I'm going to lay that flat and put my needle back down through at about that point. And I'm going to do 2 more right beside it. Just gently. And I'm going to do 2 more. So like I said, that stitch, we used it for a couple of little leaves on this piece, but now we're going to turn it into a flower. We've switched to a flower color, and I am just going to make a loop. Just go right back down, and it's just like a little greenery, a little leafiness. Just going to let that, not too big, just a loop. It's amazing how pretty a little silk ribbon loop can be in a design. And let's see, I think I'll do one right here as well. Also being careful not to grab onto my rose. So I'm just going to get a knot in this purple silk thread. And you can do dots if you need it. I tend to, you know, just kind of place things where I want them to go. So I'm going to start out here and come up from the bottom, a little bit away from my line. And then I'm going to go just across from it. Just a little, like, I don't know, 1/8 of an inch across, and go down. And this is just the first one. I'm not going to pull it all the way. I just want to get a little loop in there. And where I come up, I want to grab, I've got a little twist. I want to grab that loop over my needle. It's a really small one. Can you see? And then I'm going to go down right on the other side of that loop. This is a very tiny piece, but on a larger piece, you know, you can actually see them. Now I'm going to come up across from it, right there. And go down right here. And I'm going to come up like just before my rose and catch that loop right there. Can you see my thread is on the inside of that loop? Just pull it right down and go right back through, just a little bit away from where I caught the loop. And just pull it tight. So I have those two little turkey tracks, and I think I'll come and do some down here so you can turn your work. I have been having camera battery issues today, so I hope that I filmed everything that you will all need to see in order to be able to do these projects. But I finished this last one off camera, and here's a little close-up of what it looks like. And you know, I'm a little bit out of practice, and so I'll wait to hear from all of you and see how many of you have tried this type of jewelry making, and if you had any trouble finding supplies and what you think. And if you would like more videos like this, I can definitely come up with more projects. It's something that I really, really loved from the past. So I will put some pictures up of these two projects today, and I thank you all so much for watching. If you have not subscribed to my channel, I would really appreciate that. And if you haven't sent me your little furry-faced photo helpers, photos of your little furry-faced helpers, I'll put my email in the description box below. And I hope everyone is safe and well and having fun on your beading mats. Ciao, jewelry making friends.